Everyone, welcome to a new episode of Crypto Tips. My name is Heidi, and today I have a very special guest. Mark Moss is on the channel. We're going to talk about the Great Reset and how cryptocurrency plays a part in it and what you can expect in your life and how to prepare and protect yourself, which is what we should always be doing. So thank you, Mark, for being on the show. Can you tell our listeners today a little bit about yourself for those of you who aren't familiar with your work?
Yeah, thanks so much. Happy to be here. And it was fun talking about traveling the world and surfing and doing all that fun stuff. I think traveling the world and doing all that gives you this different perspective on things that a lot of people don't get, because a lot of people, especially in the United States, tend to just kind of stay put in the United States, you know? And so I think it's cool that we share that kind of same perspective. But what I've been working on is, for the last 6-7 years, I've been kind of creating content specifically around what's going on from like a macroeconomic standpoint, of course, all talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So I love to look at the macro environment because it tells you kind of where things are going. It's almost like if we were watching a movie about going back in time, and it's like, don't touch anything because one small little change could affect the future. And so that's kind of what's kind of like this macro thing is. And so I've been making content. I have a YouTube channel, I have a podcast, I have a nationally syndicated radio show as well. And I've really been kind of focused on this last year on really the kind of this plan. It's the Great Reset plan, which books have been written and there's websites out there, what their goals are. And then we're literally seeing it taking place right now. And then kind of focused on what the solutions are on how we're going to navigate all that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's, I guess, one convenience is they've pretty much illustrated it. And so giving us a blueprint of how to work around it can be pretty beneficial as well, if you're awake enough to realize what's happening. But what you talked about with traveling as well, that's something that, we've been worried about is that, tourism is going to be shut down or discouraged. And we pretty much saw that the past year and a half. And I was always wondering, why would they do that? And I think a big part of it is the perspective that you get from going and talking to other people in different cultures and seeing what it's actually like there versus, what information that we get with the mainstream media. I think it's really important to, talk to people in person, and traveling is a huge part of that. So
yeah, definitely. I think there's two things in regards to that specifically. One, I think that what you just said is perfect. I hadn't really I thought about it like that. Mm-hmm. I think, there's obviously a lot of censorship, right, where they don't want us communicating online, social distancing, those types of things. But yeah, I think getting that perspective is probably important. And, we see, if you're looking on Twitter and social media, you'll see that stuff is erupting all around the world. But of course, mainstream media doesn't show any of that. So that's kind of that. The other piece, though, is that, again, in their work, in their books, they specifically said that in the future, you'll travel much less. And so they want us to travel much less, I think, and they think that, traveling is going to ruin the world. And so it's going to ruin the environment. And so we should travel less so they can continue to fly around in their private jets, but we should probably stay put.
Yeah. So we keep talking about they. Who is the they behind the Great Reset? What do you think?
Yeah. So what we've seen is we've seen the entire world moving towards this centralization, like this globalization. And so, we used to really, things were kind of controlled by your own individual country, right? We're kind of at that nation state level. But today we've seen the nation state has been usurped by what we call like NGOs, non-government organizations. And it really started after the end of World War II, which was when the UN was formed up. And so we have these non-government organizations, non-government elected officials that are really pulling the strings. And so that includes the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and the World Trade Organization and the World Meteorological Association, and then the UN and then the IMF. And so all of those are like well above the nation state, and they are the ones that are kind of pulling the strings in the world. And so anyone that has any doubts can just easily look at like the World Health Organization. And when the World Health Organization said to lock down, every single country in the world locked down. And so I think any of the few countries that tried to withstand that came under massive pressure from the rest of the entities, like the IMF, like withholding funds, things like that. So I think it's pretty easy to see that. Now, who are these people? Well, it's not like this is like a big conspiracy. I mean, they literally have websites. So you can go to the World Economic Forum, or you can go to the UN, and you can just go to the website and see who's involved. The World Economic Forum, which is probably the key linchpin of this, is headed up by a guy named Klaus Schwab. And then we have, Al Gore, and we have George Soros, and then we have Mark Carney and those types of players, Prince Charles, et cetera, that involved. And again, right, they have a website, and you can go there and you can read what they say. And then even Klaus Schwab, who's led that, he's written 2 books. One of them is called COVID-19, The Great Reset. That's literally the title of it. And then he wrote another book previous to that, which was called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. And if you read those books, I mean, I just tell people I take them at their word. So I read their books, I hear what they say, what their plan is, and I just take that as that's what they want to do. And so a lot of people maybe go, wow, this is kind of conspiracy stuff, but they wrote a book about it and I'm taking their word for it.
Yeah. I mean, and also, the energy that you spent towards maybe making decisions based on what those books are saying, I don't think that's wasted energy either. I think it's always good to have an open mind and have a plan B for whatever that may be. So what is it that they're saying? Because, the World Economic Forum on their website, they have the Great Reset video right on there, and very vague. It's like the first half of the video is saying how horrible the world is now. And then it says, we need a reset. And then it shows really vague images of ocean life and glaciers, and not a lot of information on their website. But obviously, with a whole book written about it, it's a lot more specific, and very specific, actually, what we can expect life to be like in the future if they have their way. So what are those things?
If they have their way. I love that. I love how you throw that in, because they have stated a goal. So if you've heard about them at all, you've probably heard they say by 2030 you'll own nothing and be happy. Well, I'm here to try to make sure that doesn't happen. And so I think Bitcoin and this decentralized revolution is part of that piece. But I think first off, it's just about centralization. So the centralization of power, and the more centralization we have, it starts creating all types of problems, because that's not the way the world works. You can't have a few people in a room somewhere in the world telling people on another part of the world how they're supposed to live, what they should be doing about local matters and things like that. It doesn't work. Like, they can't get enough data, enough information for that. So I think it starts at that level. But, some of the things that they've said. So for example, we have to end fossil fuels. So we have to get rid of our energy. We have to, clean up the environment. And I think that's probably why you see the pictures of the glaciers and the fish and things like that. Mm-hmm. And if we don't do some serious reduction, then, the world's going to die. They specifically said that you will travel much less in the future. So that's a big piece of it. And of course, we've seen the energy has come under attack. And currently, right now, as we're talking, the world is in a full-blown energy crisis that's about to spiral out of control in a really big way. They've also said that in the future, you'll eat much less meat. As a matter of fact, they want all developed nations to not eat any real meat anymore, that you should only eat synthetic man-made meat moving forward. And we can see that very easily that meat is under attack in the United States specifically, and in Europe. There's things that are happening right now that are putting the meat and the food in serious crisis. And so that's the prices are going through the roof, and they're talking about shortages in the US and in Europe as well. So those are 2 things that are happening that we're witnessing right now.
Yeah. So this whole concept of Bitcoin, I actually read a great article on Zero Hedge the other day talking about how Bitcoin is like the new American dream of this, them saying you will own nothing and you will be happy. If that's true, property, how will they, forcibly seize property from you? I'm sure they'll come up with one way. So Bitcoin, in its encrypted nature and beautiful, autonomous and peer-to-peer fashion, you can truly own it. And you don't have to disclose that to anyone, and they can't take it from you if you don't want them to. So it's really interesting that, just in that article, again, it was comparing the ownership of property versus Bitcoin, and also just the maintenance of it. Of property over the year, it's like 3% of the value of your property usually is the maintenance cost. And with Bitcoin, just put it in a hardware wallet, and it's going to be a great hedge against inflation, not to mention a tool you can use to transact with people around the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this concept of food, I mean, that's what every economic crisis, or when that's always the indication of how bad things really are. It's like what the price of bread is, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what.
Yeah, and we're seeing that happen right now. And if you look back through history, pretty much every revolution, the final straw that like breaks the camel's back is food, right? When people can't eat, it's all over. It's game over, and we're there right now. I mean, I was doing some research this morning, and schools throughout the United States are reporting that they don't have food for their students. They can't get the cartons to make the milk to get to the kids. They're running out of food. CNN put out a report last week that you should expect much less food on the store shelves this year. That you should expect much less selection. And then what's crazy is, like, again, history repeating itself. Like, there's kind of the famous, like, let them eat cake sort of thing, which kind of showed how out of touch the leadership in France was at that time. The people were starving. They don't have bread. Oh, just let them eat cake. And so while literally the schools are running out of food, don't even have the supplies they need for their kids. And it's happening all across all the store shelves. The White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, said, when she was asked about these supply chains breaking down, she said, "Oh yeah, so what? People can't get their treadmills." That was her comment. People can't get their treadmills.
Yeah.
No, like, we're literally talking about food for kids. And then there was another article that came out in the Washington Post, and they said people just have to lower their expectations. That's what they said. So, like, we're literally in the time of abundance, in, the best time in the history of the world, in, potentially in the United States, in the richest country in the world, and people should lower their expectations and be prepared to go without food. Like, that's what they're saying. I mean, it's just insane.
Yeah. And that just shows, how much they really care. And not to mention the whole fact, the irony that I keep seeing with this Great Reset is, like, the governments now that exist they take credit for all their achievements and things, but now the world is in such an extent that it needs a great reset. So what makes them think that these solutions will be anything other than causing chaos, or really just, this whole, I think that's the most jarring category for the Great Reset, is like, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Is, for me, that means you're going to be renting. It means you need a constant stream of income. It means you're going to be streaming money for them. And where is that income coming from? It's from your time and energy that you're going to be spending at a job that you probably hate, not enriching your life with relationships with the people around you, or exploring the world that, we're so blessed to be able to check out and see all these different cultures and really enrich your life. So for me, that's why Bitcoin is such a huge thing, is not just the price appreciation. Obviously, who knows how long, that might not last forever. I think eventually Bitcoin is going to start to plateau. But this whole concept of cryptocurrencies and how they enable you to have so many different streams of passive income, that it gives you the freedom to choose how you want to spend your time, and not being a cog in their machine.
I love something that you said there, which was, if you own nothing, you'd be happy. You rent everything, which of course is kind of what their goal is. And then you kind of talked about where you kind of have to work in a job that you hate just to get enough credits from the government to get those things that you need. And if you think about things, I like to try to break things down kind of like a first principles level. If you think about it, like at the end of the day, like, everything comes down to the amount of energy that we have. You talked about putting that energy out. And so let's say that I had like a rare condition where I couldn't store fat. Well, so fat is stored energy on my body. So if I eat enough, I could get some fat, and then I could go for a while without eating. But let's say that I had a rare condition where I couldn't store fat on my body. Well, then I would basically have to be eating 24/7, or I would die, right? So I have to store that energy if I want to continue living, if I'm not eating. And so that's the way life works. That's the way the world works. And so also, as a person, if I'm working, let's say 6 hours a day, and that provides enough for me to have shelter and food, then every day I have to work those 6 hours to get the shelter and food. But if I worked an extra 6 hours, I could potentially have enough energy stored that I could use that in the future, so I didn't have to work 6 hours. And so our property, our private property, is basically our life's battery, right? So I can work harder, and I can store up that wealth, store up that energy in my property, whether that be through my money, through my assets, like my real estate, my gold, et cetera. And then that stored up energy would allow me to not work for a while. Then I could go on vacation. I could go explore the world, all those things. And so if they take away the ability to own private property, they're literally taking away your life's battery. And then you're basically kind of exactly what you just explained, which is you're basically having to work every single day just to get the sustenance that you need without ever being able to store it. And that's a really big problem. But of course, that's exactly what Bitcoin is here to fix, right? So Bitcoin is the most pristine asset in the world. And so, you can look through the last 100 years and even the last couple 100 years, and the greatest piece of wealth, the biggest wealth tool was real estate, right? Mm. So the most wealthy families in the world have acquired, massive amounts of real estate. So it's kind of like that pristine asset. Now, in lots of places in the world, the title of that property isn't super clear, and then potentially could be stolen from you. But real estate's been pretty good. And then what the rich do is they buy those assets, trophy assets, like a block in Manhattan, and they just own that forever. And then they could borrow against it when they need to. Exactly. But today we can put that into Bitcoin, right? Which is a pristine asset. If I own it, if I control my keys, nobody else has it. Nobody can take it from me. But what's even better about it is it's portable. So now I can take it with me. So of course, real estate isn't divisible. Not very, and it's not portable. And so when we've seen, people have to move around the world due to oppressive regimes, things like that, they would have to leave their real estate. They would lose it. But today we're able to store that wealth in a way that can't be taken, seized, controlled, and it's portable. I mean, it's revolutionary.
Yeah, it's amazing. And but one thing that is, I think, obviously going to be a new trend are these central bank digital currencies. That to me is like the clapback of the fiat system for cryptocurrencies. And it's amazing that Satoshi Nakamoto or whoever that was created the most free way for people to store their wealth and to transfer it and interact with money freely. And how ironic is it that now governments are taking these and pretty much are going to make it as oppressive and controlled as possible, kind of doing what they do best. But for example, the Chinese yuan, what they're talking about, their plans for their CBDC is like the most alarming one for me is their concept of putting an expiration date on their coins so that they can stimulate the economy whenever they need to. And again, going back to not being able to save your money in the future, even if you have to work so many hours and then you did save some and then you have to spend it, otherwise it's nothing. So that to me is extremely concerning, and they're going to be the first one coming out. So how are others going to follow through? What are your thoughts on central bank digital currencies?
Yeah, so the Chinese yuan is the first one coming through. Like you said, they've had multiple tests. Their goal is to have a full-scale launch next year when they have the Olympics there in China. It's kind of like this James Bond villain, like, let's invite the whole world here and then we'll make them use our currency. Jeez. It's like this perfect plan to launch it kind of a thing. And so, of course, we see other countries are scrambling to get their digital currencies out as well. I think, as you said, I would agree with you. It's very scary in a sense where it's like total control. So it's because it's programmable money. They could say, if you don't spend it by Friday, it comes back to you. And China has actually already tested some of those expiration date types things. But really, it's like behavioral modification. So it's like, hey, you're not saving enough money. So we're going to give you a 10% interest rate if you save. Oh, Mark, you're saving too much. You're hoarding. Now you have a negative interest rate, for example, things like that. They could say this certain ethnic group or this certain minority group, you get, reparations, or you get some types of funds. And so they can do all types of things. You can spend your money here, but you can't spend your money here, things like that. And so those are all things that they'll probably do. We can see, in China, they've been running the social credit score system for quite a while there. In 2018, so a couple of years ago, it's way worse now, but in 2018, 18.5 million people were denied buying plane tickets and train tickets because their social credit score was too low. They had said mean things about the government online. They jaywalked or whatever it was. And so really, I think the goal here, the objective, and again, go back, especially if you read Klaus Schwab from the Welcome Book Forum, his book on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. If you go back and read that book, you'll see where they're going. He talks about basically kind of having this connection between man and machine. And basically they want, your whole life to be in like one switch. So if they can force you to have to use this app to go everywhere, and then they put your money into that app, they put your health into that app, they also put a global ID. So that's the next thing they're working on right now, a global ID into that app. Then basically your whole life is just in one switch that can be turned on and off. And then with the central bank digital currencies, it's not even like money anymore. So like money, I could like get cash out and stuff it under my mattress or go bury gold in my backyard. But these are just like basically credits. So like the government gives you credits. And if you say mean things about the government, they take those credits back. And I don't know how they determine who gets what credits and they get other credits and things like that. But it's definitely scary.
Yeah. I mean, I do want to get into the global IDs because I'm not too familiar with that, but just to I want to say real quick about the central bank digital currencies as well as like you're all locked in. They got that noose around your neck to be in their system. They can control you a lot. That's going to encourage so many people, I believe, to pursue the other option. That is the decentralized option. Maybe it's anonymous. Maybe it's the seedy underbelly of cryptocurrencies, the black market or whatever. But you see it every time when a country is threatening to ban cryptocurrencies, huge amounts of capital flight is going into Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So it'll be really interesting to see, this trying to be applied and the reaction for people. Can you imagine, first of all, if this all happened and like cryptocurrencies didn't exist, there wasn't another option?
It'd be a scary world. It'd be a scary world. That's why we talk about Bitcoin as hope, right? Bitcoin gives us hope. It's like that life raft. Like the whole world is the Titanic and it's like going down, but we have a life raft and we can go get it. And of course, the government wants to take those life rafts away. I put out a kind of a tweet thing yesterday and I was talking about how, was it 5 months ago, China kicked all the Bitcoin mining out of the country. Yeah. Shut down over half the network. Boom, instantly. But of course, it didn't stop it. And then was it about 3 or 4 weeks ago, they did a complete ban, total ban. No one's allowed to do anything with cryptocurrencies over there. And since then, the price of Bitcoin has rallied like 50%. And so what my tweet was something about, it turns out when when the government tells people they don't have a right to hold their wealth in a way they can't steal and seize from them, people want it even more. What's also interesting about China, so of course, Bitcoin has been driving higher since that's happened, but also sales of gold are through the roof. They can't buy bulk gold, but what they can buy is they can buy gold jewelry. And so they're buying like massive amounts of gold jewelry. So when a government tells you, you don't have the right to store your wealth in a way we can't steal from you, it turns out people want that more. Yeah, I'm glad there's a reaction like that, because if it wasn't, that would be sad for humanity. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, what are these global IDs that you were mentioning before? Can you enlighten me? Because I'm not sure I know what you're talking about. So the global IDs are pretty scary. The thing with technology is like, I want it. It's like good technology. It makes my life better. I want it. But what I don't want is I don't want it like weaponized and used against me. Like I grew up like watching like the Jetsons cartoon and I dreamed of like a robot cleaning my house and like being able to talk to my house and have it do things. So I want that. I want Amazon Alexa, but I don't want it spying on me and working against me. Right. And so they kind of bait us in with these technologies. And so this global ID, it makes sense. So for example, I'm sure everybody agrees it's a pain in the butt to like, every time you go to a website, you have to create a new username and a new login, and you have like a million of them. You have to use password managers or whatever. So wouldn't it be cool if I just had one that I could just log into everything with? Like, that sounds cool. And so, of course, they're pushing for that. And so there's a couple of big companies. One of the big companies is called Accenture, and they're also the ones that are working on the central bank digital currency with the Fed as well. Stripe is also working on one as well. And so basically, if everybody had a global ID that you would use to log in and use everywhere, well, then there would be one thing that could just be turned on and off. And we can already see the narrative building up this. So for example, about the health pandemic that we're going through right now, most people are probably aware by now that there was a test run that was done, and all the players that were involved in the test before the pandemic broke out are the same ones that are there today benefiting from that. Yeah. Well, now they're doing a test run on what's called a cyber pandemic. And if you're paying attention, or maybe it's just kind of catching your ear right now, but you've noticed that you've started to see a lot more about these cyber pandemics and cyber crimes and these, these ransomware attacks and all that's like really heating up. You're seeing more about hacking. And what comes next is, well, we had this big hack. We had this big thing that happened. It disrupted a big part of the world. The internet isn't safe anymore. It's not safe for people to be using it anonymously. It causes too much damage. What we need, everybody has to now use an ID, a global ID, to get online now, because anonymous is too dangerous. And so then they'll implement that. They'll use fear, of course, right? And we already see some of that posturing happening. As a matter of fact, I think Australia is already starting to put some bills in place where you can't use the internet anonymously anymore. And so then they'll just force everybody into a global ID. And then they will say who can and who can't get off the internet. And also, you won't be able to anonymously say bad things about the government, say bad things about, medicine or whatever it is that they don't want you to talk about. You can't do it anonymously. They just turn your ID off.
Yeah. This is why I am so thankful that the cypherpunks exist and all that they've done, and that just the foresight that they had. They wrote the manifesto in 1993. That was like before the internet ever really became something, but they understood the importance of encryption to protect the freedom of speech, and obviously how that's been applied with cryptocurrencies as well. But I was reading Julian Assange's book called Cypherpunks, and he had a really good point. I loved it. It was saying how, the ultimate weapon that governments have is like the atomic bomb. And the ultimate weapon for the opposite side of that, of peace or of freedom or options, is encryption. And the best part is that no matter, you can't use an atomic bomb against encryption. You're going to need to use math, and good luck at that. So it's interesting, like the concept of like a peaceful protest. And that's what, I'm really, really happy that blockchain technology exists, and there's cryptocurrencies that you can use freely. And also, getting back to what happened with China, and when they full on banned people from even transacting in it, there was a huge pump up in decentralized exchanges too. So that's
I like to say that, like, we'll just wait and see what happens when a million entrepreneurs backs up against the wall. And so we have this new technology now, this cryptography, and it's spawning a whole new area of what I call dissident tech. So as they continue to get more invasive, more surveillance tech, then we have dissident tech that rises up, that counters that. And I think, moving your money out of their system and into Bitcoin, into cryptocurrency, cryptographically secured money, is a defensive move, right? So it defends me. It allows me to get away from the things they're going to do to me. But it's also an offensive move, because at the end of the day, all of the government's power, these NGOs, all of their power, their ability to shut down economies and force you to do things you don't want to do, and all these different things, all of that power comes because they can print money, unlimited. If they didn't have that ability, all their power disappears. And so moving into something like Bitcoin is defensive. It allows me to get away and protect myself, but it's also offensive, because as we pull money away from their system continues to crumble and lose its power, which is why they're trying to keep people in the system and not allow them to get out of it. But the more people that escape, the more power they lose.
Yeah, it's an interesting balancing act that, because at a certain point, they're going to have to make that step forward. And I don't know, is it always going to be a boiling frog scenario? Or, that's what I keep thinking is there's obviously they work a lot with fear, and they use certain events to take advantage of propagating whatever they want to. But I'm really glad that we have encryption to fall back on. So yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to cover?
Well, I think, as I said, right, I think the rise of Bitcoin is kind of this offensive and defensive move. And I think it's coming to a head. I think, you said, is it going to kind of is the frog that in the boiling pot of water? But I think they're escalating, right? So they're trying to squeeze harder, which is causing more people to push back. And so just in the United States alone, for example, we saw 25% inflation, monetary inflation over the last year. So home prices are up 25%, used cars are up 30%, which means your dollar lost 30% of its purchasing power in the last year, which forces people out of the currency. Most people are doing this and they're not fully understanding what they're doing. So people are like, I have to buy a house right now because it's going to be more expensive in the future. I have to buy a car because it's going to be more expensive in the future. But what they're really saying is I need to spend my dollars because they won't be able to buy as much in the future. They just haven't realized that yet. Yeah. Now in Lebanon, where they've had 100% inflation, they get that. Or in Venezuela, where it's 2,500% inflation. But at 25% inflation, I mean, that means you lose 100% over 4 years. It's pretty big. And so as that continues to escalate, they'll continue. And then they try to crack down on people harder. Just like China, they're doing marketing. They're doing marketing for why Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are important. So I think that's important to understand. I think that this does take the power away from them and they fail. And I believe that there's massive hope and prosperity on the other side. So I have hope. Like I said, Bitcoin's hope. It's not just doom and gloom. Unfortunately, I think the next couple of years are probably going to continue to get worse because the supply chains are so broken down at this point. Even with a magic wand, if we removed all those policies, it doesn't just snap back. And so I think people need to be just kind of prepared to protect their wealth and kind of protect their sovereignty. Maybe stay nimble, like kind of like you and I were talking about moving around a little bit, just to kind of get through these next couple of years. And then I think there's going to be great hope on the other side.
Yeah. I mean, you always got to keep your eye out. And especially these past 6 months where Toby and I have been, we were actually on a tiny little island, but ironically, a lot of people there were pretty aware of the situation. So we talked about it nearly every day. And so there wasn't a lot of socializing outside of where we were. So it was like the same people,
a little bubble.
Same conversation, kind of a doom and gloom conversation. So there's definitely a need for that, just to be aware of what's happening so you can be nimble and be proactive. But at the same time, yeah, you got to have faith in humanity as well, of being able to recognize things as they are confronted with it, because yeah, it's everywhere now. So
the other thing I would say though, is as scary as it is, in times of volatility like this, if everything just stayed the same, like you would never make money or lose money, or it just stays flat. But in times of like big volatility like this, for most people, because most people don't pay attention, unfortunately, for most people, it's disastrous for them. But for the people that are paying attention and have plans in place, that are moving their money into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies like that, it could be the biggest opportunity of your life. And so you don't have to be a victim. I mean, unfortunately, we do have to navigate this, but it could end up being, a big positive for your life after we get to the other side of it.
Yeah. And what better way to train yourself than in times like this? So
exactly. Well, like you're like surfing big waves, you have to go train in big waves, right? You have to get used to being calm in bad situations and things like that. And so unfortunately, the only way to learn it is to go through it. And that's what we're doing. Well, like I said, there is a lot of volatility coming up over the next couple of years. Next month, I'm having an event in Miami to focus just on this. And so talking about, how to build, grow, protect your wealth, how to build more wealth, how to protect your wealth, how to protect your assets. And so there are like asset protection strategies that people could use in the United States to really limit their tax exposure and get their assets out of the way of the United States. And for myself, I keep thinking like, I'll just go to South America or Central America and go surf. But some people want to stay in the United States. And so there's, we'll talk about options to stay in the United States and kind of have self-sustained land and kind of do that, or ways to get passports. So you could get passports without having to renounce your citizenship. And so, we'll talk about options like that. And so I had like 15 speakers from all around the world coming to talk about really answering two questions: what they think happens over the next couple of years, and then most importantly, what that you should do about it. And it's important to get like a bunch of different people's perspective, because as we're just talking now, there's different answers for different people depending on kind of where you line up on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great conference to be holding. It's probably a lot better than some of these other crypto type conferences of, just when moon. So, I mean, that's a great resource for people to actually bounce ideas off of, and to meet in person, I think is so important. So,
that's another big piece. I thought about having it next year because I kind of threw it together last minute, but man, with the way the laws are changing around so fast, like who knows if we'll be able to travel next year. And so I was like, let's get together while we still can.
Yeah. Well, if you have any information regarding that event, I'm happy to put it in the video description so people can check it out.
Yep. I'll make sure to give you the link so you can put the link down below.
Cool. Any final thoughts? I think this was a great talk, Mark. Thank you.
I think we've covered it all. Like I said, I just like to end probably with a message of hope. I do believe there's massive hope on the other side, but you do have to be prepared to kind of get through. So make a plan, build up some education, build a community of people around you. And if you survive, it's going to be great.
Yeah, solid advice. Thank you so much for taking your time and coming on my show. I think the audience is going to really love this. Great information. So yeah, thanks, Mark.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye.